Good afternoon. I'm Jim Eskin. On behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's my privilege to welcome you to our 27th Nonprofit Empowerment Webinar. The title of this is Let's Talk Stronger Together, but I think we also could use the 3 C's, not your report card, but collaborate, communicate, and cooperate. And we're going to meet our special guest in a moment, but before we do that, I'd like to call on my producer, John Largent, who is CEO of Game Day Media. He has been like a brother since we began this journey on April 1st, no joke. And John, can you take a moment to explain some of the logistics and also how people can type in and share questions?
Thanks, Jim, and thank you for attending today's webinar. If you have any questions, go to the Q&A bubble at the bottom of your screen if you're using your laptop, or the top of your screen if you're on your phone or your iPad, and just type in those questions. If you have any other suggestions or comments throughout the presentation today, just go into the chat room and make a quick note. Thanks, Jim. Back to you.
John. Today, I like to say that we have 3 learning objectives, and we're going to learn how to solve problems. We're going to learn how to find common ground, and we're going to learn how, as nonprofits, we can move forward together. And I want to print a bumper sticker that says, collaborate like your life depends on it. I'm going to give her a fuller introduction in a moment, but I'd like to bring in someone. I can't find the right words to express my admiration, but one of the things I love about this series, one, I get to support the success of the nonprofit sector, but then I also get to work with people that are very, very, very good at what they do. And I think we have someone who is, I was about to say, the first lady of mediation in the nation, but to be honest, there is no man her equal either. So I'd like to welcome my friend and mentor from Houston, Barbara Radnofsky. I have 2 opening questions before I give you a barrage of more serious questions. One, you have a growing family. You know, how many grandchildren? Is it? I forget.
Well, I've got 4 right now, but I'll have 5 in February. So.
Well, how first of all, is the Radnofsky family safe?
Oh, thank you. Yes, we are. We're doing well. Thank you. Everybody's fine, and hope the same for you. I know that right now y'all are good, and I hope everybody out there is. It's somehow those kinds of concerns bring us together no matter what.
Barbara, last night, I decided, you know, there's nothing that you can't answer. So I'm going to start off. It's what I call in the category of why is there air question. And I'm going to ask you because I don't know what stands out most, your mind or your heart. And that's why I think you're a perfect person to ask this question. Do you think that we can emerge from this terrible pandemic with lessons learned as a people, as a nation, that perhaps that the 200 lives lost would not have been lost in vain?
I have tremendous hope. I don't think you'll be surprised to know that because we know each other. I've got tremendous hope that 200,000 and growing, actually, obviously,
yes,
with every moment. And so, yes, I have tremendous hope. And I hope you're referring to the debate last night when you say last night, because to me, it's emblematic of what we're going to talk about today.
yeah.
It emphasizes what happens when a process is created not too well, or with improper ground rules, or without enforcement of the ground rules, or without an atmosphere of respect. So I have great hope because we had a great example last night that was recognized as a failure. It was recognized as a failure. And that means there's a whole bunch of good, normal people out there in the world who are already adjusted to the notion that you treat others with respect.
Well said. Barbara is also, we met through our joint commitment and passion to the nonprofit sector. And probably as much as anyone, maybe with the exception of small restaurants, this is a time of extreme challenge for nonprofits, because it's a perfect storm at the exact moment that the needs for the essential services they provide, their resources, both government and private philanthropy, are being challenged. Now, anybody who's served on a board, been an executive director on the staff of a nonprofit, knows they are no stranger to financial pressures. And every executive director or CEO I know knows how to stretch a nickel into a dime, but Barbara, now they have to stretch them into quarters. And the truth is, we all share one characteristic. There is a lot more that we don't know than we do know. And that's something that is hovering above all nonprofits. Our sector is big. There are 1.5 million nonprofits in the country, and there are 100,000 in the state of Texas. There are more than 6,000 in the San Antonio area. I suppose it's probably close to 10,000 in the Houston area. And by the way, we want to tell you, most of the nonprofits are small. As you see the visual here, the overwhelming majority have revenues of under $500,000. This is a breakdown. Last year, Americans gave $450 billion, which was an all-time record, to private philanthropy. And basically, who gets that money is held pretty consistent over the last several decades, where religion has gotten the biggest chunk and education has got the second biggest chunk, followed by the other folks. But they all share one thing. I don't care if you're a nonprofit CEO, executive director, director of development, a board chair, a board member, a volunteer, a reception. You're probably in it because you're very passionate about that cause. And we salute you for your commitment and service and leadership in each and every day of your work in the nonprofit. You remind us that indeed, one person can make a difference. And when nonprofits do well, we all do well, because again, you touch, improve, and save more lives. Before this, you were essential. And like now, we like to say during the dual crises, you're more essential than ever. So we have a little tradition, Barbara. We'd like everybody to type in these 3 words, nonprofit strong. Please type that in. Barbara, what are we?
Nonprofit strong. I'm still typing. You're faster than I am.
Well, you did that perfectly. In June of 2018, Andrea and I were proud to launch Eskin Fundraising Training. I had the privilege of working with community and business leaders during my higher education advancement career. And Barbara, I discovered they were fearless in everything they would do in their personal and professional lives, with the exception of asking for a gift. And what do we know about fear? A lot of fear is based on fear of the unknown. And so we've declared war on the fear of asking. And we believe that we can take any dedicated, passionate nonprofit staff member or board member or volunteer that brings to the table the Jeffersonian virtues of a knowing head and an honest heart, and we can make a great fundraiser out of them. This is number 27. We're excited in the webinars we have coming up for the rest of the year. And we enjoy our audience. Barbara is made up of really all the different sectors of the nonprofit community, and people, be professional staff or board members, volunteers, and donors. And they comprise what we call our learning community. We put out a monthly newsletter, and I hope everybody's in the database, because that will get you invited to these webinars. And if you're not, we're going to send out, first of all, we're going to post a very brief summary on LinkedIn and Facebook. And then our producer, John Largent, does a magic spin dry. And then we're going to post the recording and slides on LinkedIn and Facebook. And Barbara has volunteered to be our tweeter. Thank you. And I was pleased to publish my first book last year, 10 Simple Fundraising Lessons. And Barbara and I share a commitment to simplicity. And I got to tell you, when I wrote that book, fundraising all was about face-to-face. If you wanted to get a gift, particularly a larger gift, and get a quick decision, you asked it face-to-face. That's the way we were raised. It really wasn't complicated. Guess what, folks? I'd like to say that we've entered a new frontier because of COVID and social distancing. We can no longer go face-to-face. And guess what? We're finding out that we can work the fundraising cycle of prospect identification, of cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. We can do that virtually. We are seeing 6- and 7-figure gifts and even larger being raised. And I got to tell you, Barbara, I was, taught for 25 to 30 years, if you're going to ask Barbara Radnofsky for a large chunk of money, you better go to Barbara's home or office or meet at a restaurant and ask for it. But we're finding out that virtual fundraising is working. Okay, I have about 3 pages that I could use to introduce Barbara Radnofsky. I'm going to reduce it to 3 lines. Sorry, Barbara. But I'm going to use her own order. I'm looking at her bio, and this is the way she sequences it. She is a grandmother, a mother, a wife, an author, a teacher, and a mediator, and an attorney. And I want to add one more thing. She is a friend. I don't know how many Jim Eskins are in her orbit, but Barbara, over the last 10 years, whenever I needed some encouragement, some support, some advice, some thoughtful answers or questions, she always made time for me. And Barbara, I know you've done that. And so just thank you for being Barbara Radnofsky. You have just been if they showed mentor in the dictionary, your photo would pop up. And folks, let me tell you how we got here. And I am getting ready for the official Q&A. Over the last several weeks, I've been talking to various experts in the fundraising sector. And we've been talking about this is how you can raise money more effectively, particularly through teleconferencing. This is how you can tell your story, and et cetera, et cetera. And I started to talk, but how can we get the fundraising sector, which is so used to competing, to talking to each other? And I got some blank stares. And then I remembered one of the wisest people I know, Barbara Radnofsky. I mean, she has been a lawyer for 40 plus years, can I say that? And particularly has expertise in mediation. And so we begun to have some phone conversations and email exchanges. And I said, Barbara, can I have you as a webinar guest? First of all, it would reconnect us. And she said, sure. So I sent her some questions. And then she called back and she says, I like this stuff. And she goes, I think there's a book there. And I think I can crank it out pretty quickly. Folks, I like to think I can write fast. I write a lot of opinion pieces, and actually my nickname is the 750-word kid. And that's what my limit is, okay? And Barbara, I woke up one morning and at 5:30, not an alarm clock, but nature woke me up, and she had her draft on this wonderful new book, which is Let's Talk, 10 Steps to Peaceful Problem Solving, which she has described to a common sense guide for people and organizations to problem solve, find common ground, and move forward together in a world that has forgotten civility. And Barbara, I think there's 2 things we need the most in this world. Vaccine is number 1, but civility is number 2. So thank you for joining us. And I have several questions here. And at any time, if you have a question about Barbara's comments, just type it in the chat room. I'm going to be looking to John about 35 after to see if we got some questions queued up. And also, Barbara's been kind enough. We're going to give you a little sneak preview of some of those 10 lessons in my wrap-up section. So we want to get to that to about 4:45. But Barbara, are you ready for the Q&A?
I am, but you have to first let me say that when you say, when you're kind to me, I have to tell you, and you already know it because I wrote it in a note to you. You are one of the wisest people I know, and you will find that if you haven't already seen the first introductory part of the book, you will find that language in that part of the book.
Oh, I found it. And I said, Andrea, we're going to drink several glasses of wine. It's on that line.
There is only one Jim Eskin in my life.
Thank you. And by the way, in our conversations, we discovered that our families share roots in Mattapan, Massachusetts, and brought back a lot of good memories in the family hardware store. So let's get started with the questions. And I like starting from the basics in square one.
Mm-hmm.
What is your general thinking on approaching problem solving? And here, I'm sorry, there are going to be no easy questions. How do you create an environment that supports mutual respect, active listening, and a genuine commitment to understanding somebody who thinks different than you?
The good news is the way you create this atmosphere, which is exactly the word I would use as well, you want an atmosphere of mutual respect, and you have to work hard at it, and you have to set ground rules, and you have to establish the parameters. And it's done in a very deliberate process. And the goal of the entire process is to have rules that are enforced by the parties who have agreed to them beforehand, with an agreed upon either mediator or leader or dual leaders who will enforce the ground rules. And they embody the American experience of what I call due process, and what any lawyer would tell you getting out of law school is the first thing you learn. It is a fair process. And that's why when you ask questions about last night, the debate, why I'm so energized by the reaction of the American people, that the process counts, fairness counts. And so we can talk about the elements of that process, but it's all about the process. And it's what I teach to children with special needs, adults, and in my own mediation practice, because the best students are children, in teaching them how to solve their disputes.
I think I read in your book that usually children can solve a dispute over lunch. It takes adults about a day.
It does. Usually, for example, my mediations where people agree on me and to the ground rules and the protections of the statute in Texas, the alternate dispute resolution statute in Texas. If they agree to the ground rules, it does take a day, and there's an entire process that you'll find children can replicate over the lunch hour at school. And it's a very particular process that we go through. And you train for it. You literally need to train your folks on how to step into this process and enforce the ground rules, abide by the ground rules. And there's a number of wonderful ways that how you can create this physical environment of respect. It's a wonderful feeling, by the way, to be in such an environment.
Right. Hey, most of our audience is comprised of nonprofit leaders. Do you think there are major differences in the way that problem-solving discussions are held for nonprofits than for corporate people?
The yes part of that would be, obviously, the issues are not always the same. The factual issues. The needs may titrate to different levels. Perhaps the loftiness of the goals might be different. But in terms of the human desire for respect, and in terms of the viability of this process and how it succeeds, no, there's no difference.
Let's face it, most people, particularly leaders of nonprofits, guess what? They think they have the answers and they prefer to talk rather than listen. How do you change that mindset?
it's not just nonprofits, it's all people. It includes me. And so it's done by training. And one of the most effective training mechanisms where you teach people how to listen is with role playing and certain exercises that are done. Athletes exercise, athletes learn techniques to make them better. We better ourselves by learning what the processes are that work. And so there are specific mechanisms you can use. And frankly, role playing is one of the best.
Hey, by the way, in my fundraising training, that's the #1 exercise is role playing the ass. So give me a fist bump on that one.
Okay, I'm going to give you an elbow bump.
Okay. Oh, that's right. That's right. We got to set a good standard there. Hey, let's move to some of the mechanics.
Yes.
What have you learned works in setting the stage for a productive dialogue between leaders of different organizations, different viewpoints to find common ground?
Well, the general lessons that I've learned are rather universal, and that is, it takes a lot of preparation. You have to get people ready, and that you have to first get agreement to ground rules and teach people what are the ground rules. But in terms of getting ready, even before you get to that stage, you need to gather information and you need to find the right leaders who are going to lead the process. So there's many elements, and you're correct that we'd kind of outline 10. I outlined 10 for the book, but it's all a matter of preparation and then a commitment to the process itself. The basic guidelines are the same that we use for children. I brought my children's book here that I use with my student mediators. We set ground rules, and the children memorize them or have them on their book. And they are: no putting down, show respect, listen without interrupting, agree to keep things confidential, make your best effort to resolve, don't walk out, and carry out your agreement once you have a solution.
Hey, by the way, you got my curiosity. When you talk about children, what type of ages are you talking about?
Well, I started out in the 90s teaching elementary children.
Oh.
And then I went to junior high, which is actually, I think, maybe perhaps my favorite age level. But then I got very involved in children with special needs. I've done high school, I've done college, I've done special different groups. But junior high kids are perhaps at a wonderful level to learn this quickly and efficiently. But my favorite group are the children with special needs, because they are empaths. They have empathy, and they make the best mediators. Yeah. And the best participants, training them and seeing how quickly they respond, and the lack of any obstacles, because they want to see the process work. They have a better sense of due process than most law students do. They understand fairness.
Yeah, and they embrace it. For such talk among nonprofits, who do you recommend be at the table? How many people from board leadership, from management leadership, from staff, from major donors? Who should be at the table?
The identity should include, at the outset, somebody with authority. Let's be pragmatic about that. You're going to have somebody who has authority. And when I say authority, I mean in the legal sense. You're going to need somebody who can bind the entity legally, so that when you come to an agreement, you can actually write down an agreement, sign it, and know that people will be bound by it. Now, sometimes that requires a special person. Sometimes it requires a lawyer. But the first element starting out is somebody with authority.
In baseball, we call it the umpire.
Well, in perhaps.
Yeah.
I think that's actually I won't get down to baseball talk.
Okay.
It's really not an umpire, though, in what I'm talking about.
We'll expand, okay? Because the umpire, I think they're absolute. What would distinguish this decision maker?
Well, this isn't necessarily the decision maker,
Yeah.
because this is going to be a process that results in an agreed solution, and you do not want to have to go back to somebody who is unfamiliar with the process that has happened and have them arbitrarily say yes or no. So the decision maker, and I could pluralize that because especially in a board-driven organization where you have collaboration on a board, you're going to want to have that kind of buy-in from management, from big donors, from anybody who has a stake, stakeholders. Yeah. And so the person with authority who's going to sign the agreement also needs to understand that this was a process that everyone agreed to, didn't slip back once they identified what the problems and needs were. They went to a solution, testing solutions in a brainstorming kind of way, and then together picked the solution that was a win-win for everyone. And that person needs to be present at the process, which we'll call right now mediation, but you could call it any kind of collaboration or conversation word you want.
Okay. No easy questions. How do you recommend that the initial agenda be crafted and core issues be identified?
That's a great question because it's key. There's going to have to be some introspection at each organization about at least identifying what their needs are, but also, since the conversation's with another entity, anticipating what the needs of the other organization are. And so I would start by finding out who the people with knowledge are. And you may have that knowledge at all kinds of levels. So that's one of those answers that is going to depend on the nature of the organization, how it's driven. And good organizations, good nonprofits go through those kinds of analysis periodically anyway. And so you'd benefit from the folks who are helping do those analyses.
Yeah.
But I would go to competitors.
Okay.
I'd go to competitors, particularly in the collaboration you're talking about, as well as folks that you might think have a more normal kind of connection. I'd go to competitors.
I like that. Everything's about time. How much time should nonprofits think about committing to such a process?
Well, it would be too easy to say whatever it takes. Everybody has limited time.
Yeah.
The notion of learning how to do it and identifying the people you need, even with a major nonprofit, could be done in a week. In other words, I don't mean full time, but figuring out who the people are with authority, what are the major issues. And again, I'm talking about one that's fairly well run and has already got these analysis, these annual or however often there's a retreat, and people really do go with other professionals to help them on what the issues are. They need to identify their needs, but it's an ongoing process as well. Part of the wonders of mediation include that because you're learning to listen, really listen to learn, not just to argue with somebody. Yeah. Part of the process is you'll pick up information all along the way. And so I'd say a week, including training, if you're willing to devote the time to the exercises, learn what the process is, and it can be done in a week. Usually the lawyers I work with in a mediation will give me either a couple of pages or hundreds of pages of documents. They identify the issues. Sometimes I have thousands of pages to go through.
Oh my.
But there's ways people can boil those down to what the issues are.
You've just triggered a new thought, which doesn't happen too much. I mean, do you have some documentation now on how virtual mediation is progressing?
Well, I have experience, and I talk to my fellow mediators. It's working out very well, and I am surprised how well it's worked out. It works out very well. There's some technical problems of confidentiality that we've solved as we do in the real world, not the virtual world, For example, I would never walk into a room, one of the sub rooms. I would never just walk into a room. I would knock before I come in. And that may seem small to you, but it not only is a gesture of respect, I don't want to hear what they're saying in their caucus rooms, even for just 2 or 3 seconds. So you knock and then you go in. There is no knock knock available on Zoom, for example. And because of the high usage of mediators of this process, Zoom's agreed with, at least the guy that I usually work with, that they will figure out a knock-knock process. Right now, I just use my cell phone to say, I'm coming in. And I won't go through the details of why one person can invite everyone else, can invite me in unbeknownst to another person in a sub room, but that's the technical problem. But that just to give you specifics, it's working out extremely well because good lawyers can exploit any method where they can see and hear. Can't smell, and you can smell fear, but you can't smell. But what you can do with certain functions is like sitting next to the jury. Lawyers have this game, they want the chair or the whatever part of the table is next to the jury box, and others get an angled table, and everybody plays games. But sitting next to the jury means you get to see them and sense them, and how they're feeling even when you only have a side look at them. And with Zoom, or it's one of the other same apps, you can see their faces. You can see everyone's face.
Yeah.
And you can see their reactions, and you can understand how something is going over.
And I'll tell you the way the technology is progressing, it wouldn't surprise me in a year that we'll be able to smell that too. Hey, one of the great strengths we talked about of nonprofits is their passion. I have worked with literally thousands of nonprofit professionals and volunteers, and that's their greatest strength, their passion. They believe so deeply that what they're doing is the most important thing in the world. And guess what? When you have that passion driving you, you're going to experience a lot of success. But sometimes passion can get in the way of unfettered and clear thinking. What are your recommendations to nonprofit leaders to be able to maybe put off the side some of that passion and try to understand perspectives of different organizations?
Well, again, the role playing in how to listen is very helpful. The basics that we teach children on how to listen, including how to create the appearance of listening, and someone who has trouble with it. I have trouble with listening. The truth is, I give myself a little sign, keeps me from interrupting. By the way, wait is a common in grade school. You'll teach a child who speaks too much, why am I talking? Or junior high, once they know, and they love these kinds of little acronyms. Why am I talking? Wait. So when you have these play act shows where people do these exercises and are into it, they learn, they realize, because these are intelligent people. We're talking about people who wouldn't be where they are if they didn't have some brains about them, and other things, other leadership skills. And so once they learn the value of listening, we have one that we do where we actually have two people talking to each other and others listening, and they talk on top of each other. And the question is, when you talk, can you hear what's being said? And we give each of them one secret that they'll divulge in a subtle way and find out if the other heard it. And then we'll have the audience surrounding them also trying to listen. And it's this kind of gamesmanship proves it's really rather scientific. Can you talk and learn stuff? It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And especially if it's loud.
By the way, talk about not easy. No easy questions. What are the signals that, let's just face it, the conversations aren't going anywhere productively, and it's in the best interest of everyone to halt them?
Well, the first most obvious is when there's a repeated violation of the ground rules and you cannot enforce the ground rules. And so these are the basic ground rules. The ones for the children, I mean, grade school kids, are the same ones we use for high school kids. And frankly, in my mediations, these are now the basic ground rules I use for my mediations because I demand civility and respect. And so if someone refuses to listen without interrupting, and you cannot control them,
Yeah.
it's not going to work.
Yeah.
It would be, as we saw last night, a just about universally derided system.
Yeah.
And if it gets to the point where you cannot get people to abide by the ground rules to which they agreed beforehand.
Yeah.
The other obvious example that's even worse is violence. You can't give anybody a second chance if there's violence. So other than that, as long as people show up with authority, they don't have to use their authority. But if you've got somebody with authority, the matter can settle. The matter can be resolved. But so the other barrier I would list after the first one, which is they violate the ground rules and you cannot enforce them. You get out, you stop it, you shut it down. The other reason to shut it down is if somebody, clearly you've gone through the day, you've gone through the whole exercise. The morning is you've identified the issues. In the afternoon, you've brainstormed solutions. You've used your scribes and your leadership well. And then at 4 o'clock, they say, we don't have authority. Well, nothing you can do. You've asked them at the beginning, do you have authority? And they've lied to you. And then in the afternoon, you finally find out, well, that actually appeals to me, but I can't do it. So authority makes you shut it down.
Okay, let's go to the other end of the spectrum. How do you know when you've achieved meaningful consensus?
Isn't that the great question? Seriously, sometimes it's easier than you think. And so the ability to recognize when you have a solution is one of the arts of mediation. And the acts that we do where we have children get an entire problem and then they perform the solution in mock mediations in front of the school auditorium and their parents, goes through those processes so non-mediators, non-participants can visualize what are the kind of solutions that people come to. And the children's problems help us as adults learn. There's boy-girl problems, there's relationship problems, there's theft, there's the adult problems we have, only this is their lives. This dominates all aspects of these children's lives. And so their solutions give us kind of a sense of how easy it is. Many in the adult world, the solution is money. Yeah. That's the same thing in the children's world if it's a financial problem. But if somebody's feelings are hurt, deeply hurt, and it's affecting them, or worse, they're being bullied and they have fear, the agreements and adults supervise to make sure that there's no violence and there's no guns or drugs involved in any of these kinds of children-mediated disputes. But if the solution involves personal animosity, many times the children come up with a solution where there are mutual apologies and a representation that they will go forward for a period of time with listening and using the new skills they've got and actually work collaboratively on some special project, or give up the quote girlfriend, or whatever the dispute was, say they're sorry. Apologies go a long way. And that's included in a lot of the mediations I've done over the last many, many decades. People want to be
I'm thinking if we can't let children run the world, then every leader once started as a child, and they need to let out the little kid in them that can practice all this.
This is huge in the children's world. The notion of being able to escape bullying, to escape problems which may seem small to adults. this prevents these children from being happy and from learning and from living their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the difference between happiness and unhappiness, learning and not, succeeding and not succeeding. And so once they learn that these skills work, they grow up to be much more well-rounded adults. And what it teaches, let's bottom line it. What this teaches is critical thinking.
Yeah.
Real critical thinking, not, and you have to tell the children, critical thinking does not mean you call people names and criticize them. The word is critical thinking, but it's very simple once the children are able to learn it. And that is, you identify the problem. You then get to the position where you have enough information that's been exchanged that you can brainstorm all the possible solutions. And then you test how the solutions will work and what advantages and disadvantages come. And then the group, with the aid of a leader, and scribes are sometimes needed in complex matters, then you select the win-win or the best solution. It's really that simple, but that's critical thinking. And it needs to be taught in the schools, but frankly, it needs to be taught in the boardroom. It needs to be taught in the nonprofit world. And frankly, there's some candidates that need to learn it as well.
Okay. Hey, on that note, we're gonna take some time to review each of your 10 lessons. But before we go there, John, do we have any questions queued up from the audience?
We don't. We have a very timid audience this week, or you guys are doing such a great job. They don't have any questions at this
you know
time.
what, Barbara? I think we have some active listeners.
Well, no, we've got one from Jean that says real life examples with a question mark.
Yeah.
And I could address that only by saying, as a mediator, I'm bound by confidentiality. And so I can't give you any real life examples. But I can tell you that mediation has solved very big cases involving a lot of money, but more importantly, all sorts of non-monetary cases where people's livelihoods, people's businesses, people's families, people's marital issues, all of those can be resolved best, my opinion. And believe me, I was a trial lawyer for many, many years, decades, and tried on both sides of the docket. And this is the way to go.
Barbara, we're going to wrap up. It's not going to be quite a New York minute. We're going to call it a Mattapan minute. We're going to move pretty quickly. We said, first of all, kind of the foundation for these productive conversation is this forgotten word called civility. And I come back. We need a vaccine and we need civility. That's what the world needs.
It's pretty clearly put. And the way you can do it is by teaching it. This is an acquired skill. Providing a civil environment and teaching respect.
Okay, and the name of Barbara's new book is 10 Steps to Peaceful Problem Solving. By the way, I'm a 10 freak. If I burp, I like to kind of organize it in 10 steps. Everything I write usually has 10 elements, so I love 10 steps. And Barbara, we're going to go at Mattapan speed, and we're going to kind of take maybe a minute or so to recap each of the 10 steps. The first step is prepare and be flexible.
Plans are everything and nothing. It's good to plan, and then you need to be ready to abandon the plan. It's the preparation that counts.
And how do you know when it's time to abandon the plan?
Well, during the testing of solutions stage, particularly where the workability issues are discussed or where you realize the disadvantages outweigh the advantages.
Let's go to step number 2, and that's to choose good methods and good leaders. And again, we're going to give you a whole minute to summarize that component.
It's a key step. It's a key step. You can fashion the kind of environment you want in any way you want, as long as everyone's treated with respect and you have people that adopt those concepts and learn the concepts. And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how well they did in school. It does not matter what their role is in life. You need someone who's a true leader. Will learn to listen.
Number 3, I think you were alluding to last night. You have to have the respect for the process if you're going to move forward.
Absolutely, and it needs to be enforced. You can't just give it lip service. You have to have respect, and that's why you need to have the ground rules beforehand. And you have to have agreement to the ground rules, and you need leaders that will enforce the ground rules.
These are great wrap-ups. The Native Americans would say, you know, never comment on someone until you walked a mile in their moccasins. How do you really put yourself into someone else's shoes? Because I think that's so important.
I think empathy isn't just inherent in people, and I think many people can be taught empathy. There may be a few who cannot, but it can be taught, and that's really the process of the play acting process. As long as it's done in this context of being treated with respect as you're play acting, and then you'll see just how easy it is. It's dramatic once people are required to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and have agreed to the process.
Step number 5, learn and practice active listening. What's the difference between listening and active listening?
The skill of listening requires both measures to make yourself listen, but it starts with learning the outward appearance of listening. In other words, if you really don't want to listen, at least pretend. And so we teach children who cannot listen or...
So that's what I teach my fundraisers.
Listen, just pretend. And the act of pretending involves learning, for example, at the end of the conversation, you need to pretend you listened by quoting something they say and asking these words. Did you mean when you said this, quote, did you actually mean that? And when you give someone that instruction, guess what they have to do? They have to listen. And they have to listen as if their future language would depend on it. And so those kinds of activities get people in the format. And then let's say they don't want to listen, but they want to appear to it. You say, put your hands like this to listen to them, because that is a method of showing respect, or smiling and nodding when they do it.
You know what I'm thinking? There are so many shared best practices, tips, strategies from fundraising to mediation here. Really,
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Step number 6 is, what's the difference between just speaking and speaking effectively?
Well, it's funny. The name of the book starts off with "Let's talk,"
Yeah.
and yet although it's all about listening, that's the initial part. The part about speaking effectively is the fun part. And so there's about 10 lawyer tricks, speaker tricks, that I think anyone can learn. And so my students, especially the kids, love learning how to speak effectively to persuade. And it's the stuff you learn in college and debate and all these other mechanisms, but it involves the words you choose for your first 30 seconds, for example, or how you modulate, and that you always limit yourself to 3 main points, and that you have certain rules. People learn in 3s.
Yeah.
So you give them 3 things, and you put your most important point first.
Yeah.
And you end with the point you want them to remember too.
Okay, you're a realist. Step number 7 is anticipate roadblocks, which means, do you have some responses already to roadblocks, or what's anticipating roadblocks?
But this is talking about all the different problems that you can't solve the problem of somebody not having authority, all right? But you can anticipate just about everything else. And there are certain techniques that you can use when the roadblocks come up to break what we call an impasse. And mothers know this perhaps better than anybody else, but you can try to distract, you can try to tell a story, you can try to analyze in your own mind or get people to talk about what's happening. And so the book also has a section on impasse breaking and how you can deflect. A lot's involved depending on who you have used, not just as a leader, but who is your scribe.
Yeah.
So careful forgetting by a good scribe sometimes helps eliminate roadblocks.
Mm-hmm. That's why I always volunteered to scribe. It gives you control.
The scribe is very important. The scribe is very important. And so sometimes a leader can also scribe, but many times that's difficult to do.
That is.
Yeah. Most times in a major collaborative effort between organizations, you're going to want to have scribes.
Yeah.
So that you don't forget something, but also so that you can forget something. If it's just a vituperative comment that people want to be put down, a scribe can forget the angry comment that has no purpose other than to continue to be a roadblock.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's move to step 8, and that's learn. You hear that word a lot, brainstorm. But let's dig deeper than a cliche. What's true brainstorming?
The first element won't surprise you, and that is you have an environment where you're not put down, you're not disrespected because you come up with a stupid idea.
Yeah.
And so the first rule of brainstorming, I think almost everybody knows, which is you do not criticize somebody else's idea or even your own. You have this protected environment where you can throw out ideas and you will not be labeled as stupid, and your idea will not be labeled as stupid, at least until everyone agrees that that one won't work or has so many disadvantages that its advantages are not as obvious or as good or clear as they should be. So there's elements to learn how to brainstorm, but it is the unprotected time. That's my grandson. I'm sorry about that, but he's not outside alone. And
has he gone through a mediation class, by the way?
Well, when you're 3.
No, not yet, huh?
We've practiced a little bit. The youngest I've taught are 5 and 6-year-olds.
Okay.
A 3-year-old, though, has an exquisite sense of justice.
Huh.
And when you appeal to their sense of justice, what's right, particularly regarding food, you will find that a 3-year-old will learn to be fair if he's not hungry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move to step 9, and that's to make a realistic plan. And so, again, I'm going to put you on the spot. What's the difference between a plan and a realistic plan?
Well, this is where testing solutions this is a key question. You need to have folks who've given thought in advance and planned out, strategized about what are the real needs and what's pie in the sky. And I'm not just talking about is there funding for it, or you have to anticipate well in advance about what will actually work. And then we have to go back to your question about when do we know that we've got a solution?
Yeah.
And so this requires information gathering, and that goes back to listening, because the way you will gain additional information inside this respected process is by really listening as if your business depended on it.
Yeah.
Listening as if your life, as you say, depended on it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it can succeed. It can succeed, but you have to think outside the box.
Hey, let's go to the final step, and that is share your knowledge. I'm going to say, I don't know how many times I've worked on a task force as the staff, sometimes a board member, and you put in hours and hours of meetings and you shed blood, and then you come up with this beautiful report and nothing ever happens to it. So tell us, how do you really share knowledge?
Well, my feeling is once you learn this process, even if the particular results didn't end up with a solution that was perfect, or in one of those cases where because of situation beyond your control, such as authority, you couldn't get it settled. You've acquired specific knowledge that might help your organization, obviously, but I'm talking about the greater knowledge of learning the process. And this is where I'll return to where we started, which is, at least in the United States, and in our much of the Western culture, and now I think in much of the world, the notion of process and due process, fairness in proceedings that's enforced by an agreed upon set of rules and not just an autocrat.
Yeah.
That's what we can teach our children, along with the other element of critical thinking. We need in our educational system to embody these peer mediation programs that I've been teaching in since 1990s, and were put into the schools, at least here in Texas, by the father of ADR in Texas, the late, great Frank Evans, who pioneered not just alternate dispute resolution, but basically wrote the statute under which we function here in Texas. It has spread not just to the United States, but wide. These talents, these skills, and they're acquired skills. Some have talents, some don't. But these skills, they can be taught. And the younger we get them, the better it is. And 3 years old is not too early to allow somebody to understand how much better off they'd be if folks would listen to them. Role playing helps everybody.
Yeah.
So share your knowledge. Go volunteer at a school to do peer mediation. See one, do one, and then teach one.
Barbara, thank you for making this so friendly and easy to grasp. And now we're going to move to a couple of final lessons. Again, I want to say, as someone who loves the nonprofit sector, next to my cat, next to my wife and my cats, I love the nonprofit sector. I do love my cats, but my wife more. When we bring the boy, talk about, hopefully I'm going to get some mutual respect and describe it and take it down. Everybody wins when we bring people together to talk. We want to do that. I'm going to call this some of Barbara's golden nuggets. She's talked to us about problem-solving skills. She's told us that you got two ears and one set of lips. That should give you a clue. You should be listening more than talking. And again, the wisdom of the Native Americans, you don't know someone until you've walked a mile in their moccasins. And I'm going to come back again. We need a vaccine and we need more civility. And this, as a nonprofit sector, will allow us to achieve greater impact, because the truth is, I don't care if you're a volunteer, you're a director of development, the executive director, the receptionist, which I call the director of first impressions. We're at a time where we don't have American to waste, and we want everyone to do something, and that's particularly that how do you win boat races is when everyone pulls their own oar. We're asking now nonprofits, what do you do? What's the core? You're going to have to make some difficult choices, but what can you say that no other nonprofit can say? So think about your essentials. Also think about not just how we get through next month, but how can we be in September of 2021 in a stronger position? I know that's probably by having reserves or endowment, and so knowing that we just cannot live hand to foot or foot to mouth. Finally, Barbara, we like to say you should treat donors like family. What are you doing? You're spending the day checking with family members in different parts of the country. How are you doing? You report how you're doing. You ask if you can provide help, and that's what we're advising nonprofits. You need to communicate with donors more closely than you ever have done before. And this is easier because guess what? Most people are home. One of the things, Barbara, I'm advising, we are all falling victim to computer fatigue. And I offer, you know, after Jim and Barbara met, maybe we'll do our first 5 calls by Zoom, but maybe we have to speak after that. It doesn't have to be on camera. That way Jim doesn't have to put his makeup on, and we'll just do an audio call. So you want to be sensitive to their communication preferences, and also nonprofits, wherever you can share a positive story. And there are heroes arising in the nonprofit sector every day. I know your donors would love to hear about that. And we're telling you, don't take your foot off the fundraising gas pedal. This is the time. You don't know everything, but to gather in the spirit of the mutual respect, and this is now more internal conversations, and decide what can your nonprofit do within the confines of COVID-19, and do it, and do not. I'm going to tell everyone, you don't have to watch how others are doing it. Act now. And here's the good news, Barbara. Philanthropy is remarkably resilient. Last year, it hit a record $450 billion. And we're seeing signs that actually philanthropy is responding more robustly to COVID than it did during the recession of 08 and 09. And primarily the best predictor of philanthropy is the stock market, which has remained amazingly strong. There have been surveys that some donors are going to increase, the majority are going to keep at the same level. Very few are going to decrease their gift. And we have a vehicle called Donor Advised Funds, which is an enormous parking lot of potential charitable dollars. We're seeing explosions, and we are seeing billion-dollar gifts from people who we never really heard of before. One, the founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey. The other, the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos. She's already donated $1.7 billion. So there are a lot of good signs. Remember that most of the philanthropy comes from individuals, and that big gifts, you know, the Karl Marx School of Fundraising probably is not going to work. If you want to raise $100,000, you can't get 100 people to give you $1,000 each. Usually there was an 80-20 breakdown. Now we see it's more like 88-12. And our story challenge is not complicated. Find a way to brighten their day, find a way to inspire them. And Barbara, I like to end with a money back guarantee. Your chances of getting the gift go way up when you ask. Your chances of getting the gift, that's Eskin's money back guarantee. So don't watch and wait. Go out and continue to tell the stories of your nonprofits. Go out and continue to nurture relationships, thank donors, and go out and continue to ask for gifts. And I repeat myself, John F. Kennedy, like so many of our generation, was a hero when I was growing up. And he said something in his commencement address at American University. I went to GW, so I wish it was at a GW. But anyway, on June 10th, 1963, and Barbara, this gives me goosebumps because it's like he's talking to us today on September 30th, 2020. Our most basic common link is we all inhabit the small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal. It gives me goosebumps to read those words. It's like President Kennedy wanted to inspire us right now. I want to thank my friend and mentor and Barbara, just thank you for being Barbara Radnofsky. And again, remember, we carry the spirit of Mattapan, Massachusetts on our shoulders. So if it's okay, we look forward to coming back to you to talk about how the nonprofit sector can do a better job of talking and collaborating and communicating and cooperating. So our plan, folks, we are going to post something on LinkedIn and Facebook. Barbara is the designated tweeter, and she's going to tweet. John is going to have a magic spin cycle. He usually says, Jim, you got time for one glass of wine, and he's going to put together the recording and tape of this program which was so enlightening. And Barbara, we can't wait until your book is out to help us do the things that we need to do. And so let me wish everyone good health, safety, and thank you for comprising our learning community. Barbara, it was a pleasure. And to your family, stay safe.
Thank you for everything. I'm most grateful to you.
It was a pleasure. John, how are we?